I'm being told to hold.
Go.
Hi, everyone. Sorry for the slight delay this evening. We have switched locations. We are now broadcasting from our library downstairs at the museum. This is for our live stream audience, as well as for all of the people that showed up this evening. So thank you guys for coming. If you don't know me already, I'm Angelina. I was the chief curator up until a few weeks ago, and now I'm also the executive director. But I've been with the museum since we opened. That was employee number 2. And I've been a poster historian for about 20 years. And with me this evening is Tim Medland. He is the curator of, we tried to warn you, environmental crisis posters 1970 to 2020. And one thing that we get questions about all the time is how an exhibition is made. What goes into the process from ideation to getting the pieces, to putting it on the wall, to curating a show. So we decided to create a talk on basically what goes into the sausage. And we invite questions. We're very, very casual about this. You can interrupt us at any time and ask us anything you want about how we made the show. We've prepared slides that you guys can see at home and that you guys will see on the screen. They will basically help me do some guiding questions that I've done at the beginning to kind of set the scaffolding for the event, but then absolutely ask whatever you want. So to begin with, I often get questions about like, what is a poster? Because a lot of people come to us and say things like, oh, I have this poster at home, and then I see it's absolutely not how we would define a poster. So I figured starting by saying, how does Poster House define what a poster is? How do I define what a poster is? And so we always say a poster is a public-facing notice meant to persuade that marries word and image. And typically it's also printed multiples. So what does that not include? If it's a handwritten sign that you carry in a protest, that's signage. That's not really a poster because it's not printed. If it says live, laugh, love, that's a print because it's not trying to get you to do something. A poster is getting you to act. So buy something, vote for somebody, attend an event. But if it's just like inspirational, that's not really a poster because it's not a byproduct of commerce. If you look at the things that we have in the museum, they're all byproducts of commerce in some way. So the images that I have up there now are just 2 examples of wildly different posters. One from Japan, one from France, and they're both advertising something. But then as far as how this particular show was made, and Tim's show comes down in a few weeks, it is our longest running exhibition. It moved from the main gallery downstairs to the hallway just because of popular demand. I wanted to ask Tim, how did you pitch us the show? Because unlike a lot of our shows, like the Nike show comes from a single collector. It is for the Art Deco show, single collector, where I knew the collector, we got the exhibition as like a package, and then we created the text around it. With this show and many other shows that we do where we are creating the show in-house, it comes usually down to a curator pitching us a concept that I then see if how reasonable it is to execute. And so, Tim, how did you pitch us this show? And I believe this quote was kind of the seed that was planted that gave you the inspiration for the show.
Yeah, I mean, it started during COVID. Everybody had time on their hands, and I had plenty of time on my hands, and I was sitting out in Vermont. And my youngest son was at the time doing an undergraduate degree in climate science and public policy. So I was spending a lot of time talking to him about it and reading books myself. And I saw this quote from Bill McGibbon, the famous American environmentalist, and it refers to the fact that it's hard to measure the tragedies that happen. You know, we can measure bad things in the air, bad things in the water, but we can't actually measure the human cost. Only art can do that. And I thought that's really an interesting point. It stuck with me. But I also then thought, wow, of course, posters are, you know, confluence of art and design. And I knew there were lots of posters dealing with climate change, with environmental disaster. So I thought there's got to be a show in this. And so when I first mentioned it to Angelina and Julia at the time, it was very much on the basis of, you know, it's 2020, modern environmentalism started in 1970, so there should be 50 years of posters, 50 years of data, 50 years of art to look at. And that was the initial point.
And how did you decide to orient the show? So typically I do a lot of shows chronologically. I think that's the easiest way for people to understand an arc of history, but you wanted to do it in a slightly different
I'm
presentation.
Yeah. The the thing was that I knew I wanted it to start in 1970. I knew I wanted to cover 50 years. Great. But curators by definition are nerds. They read a lot. They try and be creative. And one of the things while I was reading research for the show, it'd been agreed that the show would exist. And I was like, what is really interesting is that, yes, we're starting in 1970, but environmentalism is not a modern construct. What was fascinating is that there were quotes I was finding from 1500 BC, 500 BC, talking about respect for the planet, respect for the environment, and how humanity was tied to a healthy environment. And then it struck me that we had the four ancient elements: earth, water, air, and fire, which was why I then put the show together in these four, because it makes sense. And the poster you can see here is the first Earth Day poster, and it's got by Robert Rauschenberg, who at the time was America's most famous living artist at that point, and he was an activist on environmental issues amongst others. And the first Earth Day was an extraordinary phenomenon. I had not realized how big a deal it was. The population of America in 1970 was 200 million people. 20 million people marched or got involved. 10% of the population. Not giving likes on Instagram, actually getting involved physically. And which probably explains why Richard Nixon, in the State of the Union address that year, gave this quote. And I wanted that quote very much in the show because environmental issues have become politicized around the world, but especially in America. And the point was, if Richard Nixon, he's famous for a number of things, being a sound environmentalist is not one of them. If Richard Nixon could get it, anybody could. And I wanted to depoliticize it as much as possible.
I also have this image from the show to talk about the modes of interaction you had with it, how you laid out the exhibition.
Yeah, I said it's earth, water, air, and fire, and this is obviously earth. And one of the interesting things was why we use the images we do, and particularly in the early part of the modern environmental movement in the 1970s, it was about save the planet. So we were dealing with, our air quality is bad, we've got to do something. Our water quality is bad, we've got to do something. The causal link to the reason we've got to do something is because humanity is threatened had yet to happen. People were not drawing those conclusions, and indeed we didn't know that the vast majority of people did not know that climate change was a threat. Some people did, but the photograph on the right hand side for me, not sure which way it is when you're looking at it on the screen, is the first. It's called the Earthrise photograph. It was taken in 1968, and it's the first time that one of the Apollo missions flew around the moon and could actually therefore see the Earth from that vantage point, as if from the moon. And so it's been known as the most important environmental photograph ever taken because it showed both the beauty of Earth but the fragility of it. Great, and you can see on the other side, let's just say the artist was inspired by the poster. By the photo, sorry, thank you very much. I don't think he would have necessarily come to it without that photograph. So you see the repeat of images as you go through.
And when you're looking at any of our exhibitions, you'll often see photographs on the wall labels, and that's usually when I guess curator want to draw attention to something that is required to be visual. So if we just said the Earthrise photo, like you guys would not necessarily know what that is without Googling it. So I often try to incorporate additional imagery into the wall text, even in miniature, just so there's a reference point that's visual as well as written. And then finally, in your like layout of the show,
yes,
I always like this piece because this I think is the turning point when the narrative around environmentalism changed. This
is by Tom Eckersley, British artist, and you can see it's for the World Wildlife Fund. But it's the point where our simian friend is pointing to the fact that man needs rainforests too. So it's from 1987, and the very clear message is coming. Yes, rainforests matter, but actually they matter for humanity. So it's, as well as, don't forget our monkey friend, but it matters for humanity. So it's the first time that I could find in a poster that point was made. And obviously my medium is posters.
The other thing that we are really tuned into when we're building a show is just making sure that there's a confluence of diversity of voices. So you were very adamant in the show that you wanted to include as broad a representation as possible, both from various countries and various artists that you wanted to include.
Yes.
Which definitely keyed into what I was collecting for the exhibition. So I thought you could talk about 3 pieces I've chosen for you, starting with one by Amos Kennedy.
Yes.
We just had a great, if you guys know Letterform Archive, they just released the first book on Amos Kennedy that's beautiful and brilliant. And Letterform Archive, I hope you know I'm plugging you.
Hashtag Letterform.
Yes, indeed. There are like Counterpoint on the West Coast. But yeah, so Amos has gotten this massive amount of traction. We did a show on him as soon as we reopened after COVID in the front hallway. Salvador, who runs our programming night, the residency with him last fall, so he's very much part of the pulse of the museum. And we already had this in our collection, so this was something that you caught.
Yes.
And why did you want to include it in the exhibition?
Very simply, it's a march for climate justice, and climate justice is very simply the understanding that both within the US and globally, it is the less well-off communities that suffer the most. So there's this double whammy of unfairness, as it were. They pollute the least and they get hit the worst. So I actually had some Bangladeshi climate scientists came in on the opening day of the show, and this is a country which really pollutes very little, but 50% of the country, 60% of the country is below sea level. And so it's going to flood. And there's an awful lot of Bangladeshis that are going to be looking to go somewhere. And that's not going to be an easy thing to deal with. And within the US, obviously, we've had multiple instances where certain communities have been hit way harder. So I wanted to try and bring that forward and highlight that.
Can I ask you a question? I'm just curious. What is your background, both in terms of education and curating exhibits, and how is this exhibit different from the other ones you've curated?
It's a very good question. It's going to be a slightly long answer, so bear with me. I am a late in life curator. I worked in a completely different field for a long time, decades.
Which was?
Finance.
Oh, okay.
We hired a finance bro.
I'm hardly a bro. I resent that statement.
Sorry.
But one of the things that I did in finance was I managed natural resource funds. So, and I had moved towards a focus on green energy, stuff like that. So I had a background of knowledge as to what had happened. But as part of that experience, I have been undoubtedly to what are the most polluted places on Earth. In China, in Africa, in Russia, I have seen hellholes. So I've seen in real time what some of these places look like. So environmentalism is an issue.
You were in, what's the place in Russia where all the nickel is mined?
Norilsk.
Norilsk,
Yes.
yeah, which I think the life expectancy there, if you live there, is 35 years old, because it's that polluted.
But of course, you need the nickel for the nickel batteries for all the electric cars. So it's a complicated project.
But you've been there.
Oh,
and
I've been
seen
there,
that
yes.
it's like it glows at night.
Yeah, and I've been there in the 1990s when it was at its worst, and I've been to the coal mining areas of China. Anyway. So that was where part of this comes from. But after I stopped being a finance bro, to use that term, which I don't like, I did a master's in museum studies, and I found the light. So I'm now a righteous curator as opposed to a finance bro.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
And the other questions while we're taking a break.
I think it's very interesting, but how much posters? How many posters do you have in the collection right now?
In the whole, in just the exhibition?
in this work, in your work.
There's 38 posters from 27 countries.
Wow. Yeah.
Because I was thinking about the issues, because you mentioned America, of course, but I'm going back to Latin America. So I like to know, what did you find in terms of Latin America with posters with this problem?
In this issue, none.
No, there's a Cuban poster.
Oh, it's Cuba. Well, yes, Cuba is.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting thing, because when we are sourcing the posters, we have some stuff which comes to us naturally, but basically we work with 25 poster dealers.
36.
36 poster dealers, and they have inventory. So we go to them and say, just send us everything you have.
Images, don't just send, I'm not expecting packages in the mail.
Yeah.
But we get the images of the posters, we go through them, and I very much wanted Latin American images. I desperately wanted Indian images for all sorts of good reasons. I wanted African images. So, I mean, because the poster industry is
Dominantly Western. Japan has quite a decent tradition, but I wanted as many countries represented, and I particularly wanted the countries that had the most issues, but they don't necessarily have a poster culture. More importantly, if they do a print run, it requires enormous bravery to be an environmentalist in many countries. If I go on a march, I can be arrested, and I'm a nice older gentleman. They'll stick me in a cell for a couple of hours, and then they'll let me go. I can name any number of countries. I'm going to pick one at random. There's some Vietnamese students. They've been in prison now for 18 months for tax evasion because they protested an environmental issue. Well, they're students, so they have no income. So I'm pretty sure they're not evading taxes, but that's the type of stuff you have. So, carrying a poster, going on a march, printing a poster runs risk in lots of countries. So that's one of the other reasons I just think there aren't that many posters available. Although specifically to Latin America, like Mexico has the
Has
the oldest printmaking culture in the Americas.
Yeah.
So like it was very shocking to me that we couldn't find anything
We looked.
for me, particularly from Mexico, just because I figured that would have such a robust amount of posters, but we just weren't able to source any.
I could believe that one of the problems, or if it's a problem, is that we didn't consider that the environmental problems were a problem for us in Latin America.
Yeah.
So maybe that is why there is no considerable production of posters in Latin America for that.
Yeah.
Maybe we can go with politics, etc.
There's also, have you been to the Met's current show on Mexican posters that's on view right now?
Where there's the furniture.
No. It's if you go up the big stairs at the Met and you turn right, there's the prints and drawings department. They just opened a wonderful show on Mexican posters and prints. It's excellent, and these pieces have never been shown in the museum before. And the one thing that I learned when I went on the tour with the curator was that the posters are so insanely rare that the only reason the Met even has them is because an artist was collecting them in Mexico at the time and sent them to the Met as they were being made. That otherwise they just don't exist. Like nobody preserved them. So there's also the second step of, even if they were made, who was saving them? Most posters are used. The posters that survive today, whether they're like 1880s France or something from 20 years ago, they're only here because somebody chose to save them. If they weren't chosen, they don't exist.
And most of these posters are by named.
For example, you have this in the show. This is you want a poster from some country in Africa.
Yeah.
And the best we could do is a poster by Eric Carl, who's obviously a very hungry caterpillar guy, who did a poster
For the United Nations Environment Programme, which is based in Nairobi, Kenya. So you can see Mazingira 82. Mazingira is Swahili for environment.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's also a very good backstory. Kenya a woman, it's important that it's a woman. A woman activist in Kenya started a tree planting program in 1982. 1980, this is the start of 82, started celebrating it, and making the point that, okay, we're knocking down lots of trees, let's replant trees at least. Life got hard for her in Kenya as part of her activism. Her husband divorced her, besides other things. But Kenya in 23 became the first country in the world to have a national planting trees day, where it's a national holiday. Everybody gets the day off, paid by the government, and they go and plant trees. So, but it takes time. But I just wanted, it is a poster, set in Kenya at least. Although Carl is
He's not Kenyan.
he's not Kenyan. His museum's in Massachusetts, I think.
But yeah, so in instances where we don't have something by an artist from a given country or representing a certain area, we try to find other ways to even bring in that narrative. So in this case, Eric Carl, not Kenyan, but we can talk about Kenyan issues because it was a poster meant to be in dialogue with what was happening in Kenya. So finding tangential ways to bring in other narratives, even if they aren't overt in the poster, is something we always try to do.
How do you, so one more question I have, how do you consider the importance of posters? Now that you mentioned the problem with the trees, we have in Colombia this paper company, big paper company. So they grow these foreign trees that are not like the Colombian trees. So it's a problem. So they usually have this yearly calendar.
Yeah.
So they pick like renowned artists from Colombia, like Botero or many artists, many painters, and they have this calendar, Cartón Colombia. So they have this calendar. They talk about trees and etc. But they pick pieces from the artist. So that is from a company, or there is this company about soap, jabón puro, the pure soap. Yeah. So they have they had a campaign about taking care of the water, and our products are like friendly with water.
Yeah.
In those cases, for example, do you consider to use that material?
So a calendar.
Well, not a calendar, but
not the calendar,
no,
but the materials that the companies.
You will see as we go through. Yes, we've referenced corporate activities for good and for bad.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of greenwashing where what not every company, but many companies seek to do is to persuade the consumer, hey, you've got a problem. You're polluting the atmosphere. And by doing that, they deflect from the fact that their production facilities are actually the issue. And not only that, they're classically lobbying with governments to be able to pump undiluted effluent into rivers and stuff like that. But we will get to that.
Well, actually, I'm gonna skip it. I'm gonna skip.
Oh no, we've got to talk about him. Okay, go on, carry on.
Does anyone want to talk about this poster? Okay. Fine. Well, I was gonna skip ahead to something corporate, but
So
sure.
one of the funny things when you are creating a poster show, the images come in, and I looked at this poster, and acid rain is a very, very serious issue. When the monsoons start in India, the acidity of the rain is the relative pH of grapefruit juice. So it's very bad. It's bad for crops, it's bad for buildings, it's bad for your hair. But I looked at this figure and I thought, what a good looking older man. It's obviously follically challenged, but nonetheless still very important. So I smiled when I saw it. And I'm very, when you are dealing with very, very serious issues, it is important to leaven the message with humor. Because if you this show could have been enormously depressing. Because you could have just clubbed people with bad news. And what would have happened is they would have walked in, done a quick circle, and gone out within 5 minutes. And what I desperately wanted, my aim, was for people to walk in, look at the images, and read the wall text, which explained the science and facts, which people did not necessarily know. And my joy is the right word. My joy from the show is that because I'm a terrible nerd, I have stood there watching people in the show and just stood there for a couple of hours just watching what happens. And the average time spent in the show is 45 to 46 minutes. And they've done all sorts of work in museum studies, which I did my master's in, which the average time that people spend in front of a Cézanne or a Van Gogh or something like that is 45 seconds. So if they're coming in to our little show here and actually reading the wall text and thinking about things, then the show has done what we wanted to do.
But speaking of the wall text that he just mentioned with the monsoon rain being the relative pH of grapefruit juice, like that type of succinct means of describing something scientific was something we really negotiated with, because we didn't want the show to be so impervious, so like such a wall of scientific facts that like no one could get it. We wanted a fifth grader to walk in and be like, okay, I know grapefruit juice is acidic. I wouldn't want that to be poured on my hair or poured on my house because it will like eat away at stuff. We were trying to figure out ways to talk about big scientific issues in really simple ways. Like he talked about there was one poster about the rainforest where we lose 2 or 3 New Jerseys every year.
Yeah.
In deforestation in Brazil.
Yeah,
so that making the scientific facts digestible in the science-heavy show was a challenge, but something that was very important to us. We're actually co-curating a show that's opening in the spring on nuclear weaponry and nuclear power and the history of that, and finding ways to like talk about nuclear fission and fusion into wall text that isn't just daunting. Was actually really fun.
Yeah, and the apocalypse. Nothing to worry about there.
But yeah, so when we're presenting exhibitions, actually want to be as welcoming to as broad an audience as possible. Be that like my little sister or somebody whose first language isn't English, or someone who doesn't have a background in whatever topic you're presenting. We want them to be able to read it. Because the thing I hate is if I go to the Met and I'm reading the wall text and I have no clue what's going on, and I'm like, I am your audience. Like, who else are you talking to? If you're a curator and you're just trying to impress your colleagues, you're not doing your job. So as far as creating wall text, that's our main goal. I think you had a question.
In that show that the two of you are curating, is that here?
Yes, it'll be upstairs in the spring. It'll include there's a very famous series of posters that was put out by General Dynamics. They are still a weapons manufacturer, and they are considered some of the most beautiful posters ever created in the 20th century, and they're gorgeous. But then we also wanted to find the counter. It's the first time we're doing a counterpoint show, where we're showing like corporate branding, the corporate message around nuclear energy, and then the counter protest to that as well. So it's a really layered, I'm very excited by this show. And also it's a museum. It's important for us not to really have an opinion on the matter. We want everyone to come out with their own opinion on the
nuclear apocalypse is bad.
Yeah.
I have that opinion.
I say that.
Yes. Nobody wants nuclear war, but even within the environmental movement, the thing that we didn't put into the show because we just didn't have space was some environmentalists are very anti-nuclear energy, even though it's the cleanest form of energy because of the obvious like risk of Chernobyl options. So that's a complication as well.
Cool.
Oh, sorry.
Otherwise, you're going to run out.
Oh, well then. All right. So then, you already talked about humor.
I've already talked about humor.
So we're going to go to this. So you asked about what do we do with a corporate poster? This poster is not a joke. This is a real poster put out by Lexus.
So this one was actually in our archive. We have what's called the Living Archive.
The Living Archive, where I'm in touch with hundreds of design agencies around the world, and we ask them to send in the best posters they've made every year, the posters that have won awards. This poster is this is from Brazil.
This is Argentina.
Argentina.
Oh,
sorry.
okay.
So this is from Lexus in Argentina. It was done by Ogilvy and Mather, which is a big international advertising agency. And Ogilvy's Argentinian branch made this and 2 other posters that presents a sense of humor that does not translate to American audiences.
I don't think it translates to Colombian audiences looking at your face. So no.
Yeah.
So this, obviously it's an advert for Lexus. Lexus, as part of Toyota, are the largest producers of hybrids in the world, so that's good. And this glamorous couple are riding along in their Riva speedboat, costs $600,000, runs 2 V8 engines, so it's not the most economical of vehicles. They're obviously trying to save the whale, that's good, but do you like them? I don't like them.
No. So negative.
It doesn't make you, I don't think it makes you like anybody really. You don't like them, it doesn't make you think, oh gosh, these are really sound people. So, but it's a corporate message for Lexus saying, we're a righteous company. It just seems to lose everybody. But yeah.
But it was an award-winning campaign put out by Ogilvy and Mather in Argentina, so in Argentina, this was exceptionally successful as an ad, but just does not translate visually or in its approach to other audiences.
And we had a couple of Argentinians come in and said, well, it is very funny. So no, I get it's funny, but it's not.
It's black humor.
Yeah, it's black.
But does it make you want to buy a Lexus?
Not at all. I think it goes against the
Yeah,
brand.
it makes me not want to buy a Lexus.
Yeah.
But it looks very much like Lauren Sanchez, Jeff Bezos' girlfriend.
Oh yes, oh yeah. Kind
So
of.
that's
Well,
why-
this would have predated that relationship.
But so I'm looking at that going, well, what's the messaging here?
Yeah. And
Well,
then
that's a stereotype of women in Latin America. So yeah.
Yeah, so it's a very specific look. But yeah, so that's an example of a corporate message.
we've got some others too.
Yes. So actually, one of the things I talk about is how we acquire posters. The one we just showed, we get through the Living Archives, that's from contemporary design agencies. The other way is I email all 36 poster dealers. They send me back hundreds of images. We cherry pick what we want. This is my favorite poster in the show, but I'm a very strange person. It's from Switzerland. It's by Hans Erni. This is what would be considered like the highest, the most valuable poster in the show because it's by one of the most renowned poster artists. It's from Switzerland, so huge poster culture. Switzerland has produced more posters than any other country in the world.
And it's not a very big country.
A very small country, and also Switzerland's not exactly a high pollution country, so this is sort of like it's going over the top on a country that wasn't exactly a huge problem to begin with. You'll notice it's printed in 5 languages. Any government issued poster in Switzerland has to be printed in the 4 official languages of the country, as well. And in this case, they added English as well. So the 4 languages are Italian, French, German, and Romansh. That's very few people speak Romansh. But yeah, so this would have been like a classic poster that most poster dealers would have had. The other poster that's like on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, we didn't get from a dealer. I found this on eBay. And this would have been like an in-car subway poster, like those. So it's a thicker, like cardstock. You can see, you can see the wear and tear on the edges. That this was something someone took out of the subway at some point in time. But you were very adamant that we had this because.
Yes. So my accent probably betrays the fact that I was not born in America. So this is I know, who would thunk it? This is from 1971. So if you think about it, the modern environmental movement, Earth Day 1970, this is 1971. And it's by an organization called Keep America Beautiful. And it's a still from a TV advert. And for those of you who haven't seen the advert, it starts with a Native American paddling his canoe down a stream, which opens up to a larger river. As the camera pans out, you see smokestacks behind him, you see trash in the river, the English word is wazzock. A silly person drives up on the road by the river, throws a bag of trash in, drives off, and then the camera pans in onto the Native American, a big fat tear rolls down his face, and the voice says, pollution, it's a crying shame, people start pollution, people can stop it. And this was a massively successful advertising campaign. It was an era of physical film, not digital, and the TV stations were running it so much by public demand that they were wearing through the film. So they were actually asking for more film to be sent to them by Keep America Beautiful. And undoubtedly, to be clear, it made the American public think, I should not be throwing things in the river. And if that was the end of the story, it would have been all good. However, it's not. Keep America Beautiful, although a not-for-profit enterprise itself, was actually owned by major American packaging corporations. And they were lobbying the government at the time this was going on for the right to keep on pumping stuff into rivers. So it's the first real greenwashing campaign where they're saying to you, yes, you've got a problem, don't look at us. And when actually protesters turned up, the corporations Keep America Beautiful described them as communists and said they're anti-American, they're doing, they have no right to do this. So it was this it was massively successful, it was good, it was bad. But the other gem is that this is an actor, his stage name was Ionized Cody. He's actually an Italian American.
Remember.
So he's not a Native American. So it's basically
he was 10.
Yeah, no, this man was shot so many times by John Wayne in movies. It's that sort of. He was in lots of westerns. So in 2023, Keep America Beautiful still exists as an organization. After decades of reflection on the matter, they handed over the rights to this campaign to the National Congress of the American Indian, who immediately withdrew it from circulation, saying it's always been inappropriate. So it is the fascinating thing with environmentalism, where there are layers.
Yeah.
Insofar as it made people think I should not throw trash in a river, really good. In every other way, just crap, basically.
But we didn't even really know that about the campaign. I knew it was an important campaign because I remember it when I was a child. So that was the initial reason why we wanted it. And then as you did more research, you were like, oh no, oh dear.
No.
It's like literally a microcosm
Yes.
of climate change conversations,
Yes.
especially in America.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it's like the more you dig, you're like, that's my life.
Yes, no, exactly. No, it
It's
is.
horrifying.
If you come back for the nuclear energy
I
show,
will.
oh my God.
I will.
I built that, but my portion of that show is built on court documents. I had to go through antitrust lawsuit files to figure out what, this company bought this company because it led to this. It was like, what? The nuclear weapons manufacturers own the supply chain for Coca-Cola. It was wild. So please come back for that show. But also, Bryce, is there anybody who has questions on? Sorry, you're not Bryce. Shaquille, is there anyone who has questions online?
There's no questions, but you guys are more than welcome to throw questions in the chat, and we'll answer them.
Yeah, including my mom, who I know as well. That's who's been texting me. She's
That's good.
yeah.
It's good your mom's proud. Next one.
Yes. So another thing that we wanted to talk about in this presentation was preserving posters, because not all posters have been preserved properly. Most of the fancy posters that we get, so things that were in the Art Deco show, or things that are in the Lester Beale show down here right now, they have been preserved through a process called linen backing, which is kind of like the standard across the board for the preservation of posters. It means that I take the poster, I have it by a professional linen backer. They put it in a bath that kind of lifts the dirt off of it. Sometimes that bath will include a very gentle bleach substance that will lighten it. You can lose pigmentation during the time, but usually a professional will know how to do that. Then they lay that paper on an acid-free piece of paper that is also in turn laid on top of a piece of, it's not actually linen anymore, but fabric that's kind of very durable. And then it's stretched in the frame and dried that way after it's been kind of laid flat. And what that does is it makes it impossible to kill. I've had a poster thrown out of a 5th-story window, and it's perfectly fine because it's been linen backed. Linen backing is great, but that's the American standard. Europeans will lay them on Japan paper, which doesn't really preserve anything. It's you can still kill a poster if it's laid on Japan. Different cultures, different poster collecting cultures have different responses to preservation. But a lot of the posters we have, especially because these aren't the fancy $50,000 posters, they came to us in various conditions. So you'll see in this one, in the upper right corners, you'll see a bunch of dirt. You'll see a coffee stain around his knee. So these things, this poster went to a linen backer to be as cleaned up as possible, and this is still the best we could get it without either removing ink or having to do some overpainting, which I'm generally not a fan of overpainting. Is exactly what it sounds like, that the restorer will paint over the damaged part. So that's what with something like this, whereas something like this poster was, when we got it from a dealer, it was actually a mailer. So it was full, you can see the fold lines in it. And on the back had someone's address. And how do you preserve a mailer? Do you linen back it? Because if you do, then you lose the address on the back, so you're losing some of that archival information. But you would also lose the fold marks, which makes it look better. So there's always this dance of like, what am I willing to lose to make it look better? Is there something to lose in the preservation process? And that I do with, particularly with contemporary posters, there's always that like push-pull of what's best for the display and what's best for the object and what's best for future researchers looking at this piece.
And this was interesting for us with this show because we're still the show has been up for a year, basically, for nigh on a year, but we still want to expand the archive we're building of environmental posters. So, if posters do become available from other countries, we will add them into the thing. Because what we found when we started looking at this, there was no actual real collection of environmental posters. So we really want to build like the definitive one, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm also very active. Like I'm going to be in England next week pushing to travel this show. So I'm hoping that other design museums around the world will want this either smaller, and if they want it bigger, Tim can write more labels for the additional
I
pieces.
can write so many labels.
For the additional pieces we've purchased in the meantime, are ones that just couldn't fit in the actual exhibition.
I have a nerdy financial question to ask you.
Yes.
So if you're getting it from a dealer, is that a loan or a
That's
purchase?
a purchase.
And if you're purchasing, how much does that cost to put it in, clean it up, back it?
Great
How does,
question.
and
So-
where do you go to do that?
So because I used to be a dealer, I obviously have an industry discount. So I get posters at a slightly different price than like you would if you went to the same dealer. There's also just like a long-standing relationship, and so the margins are a little bit different there. And then as far as preserving a poster goes, the cost can vary tremendously. If it's just a straight up linen backing, like if I gave somebody this piece of poster to linen back, or this piece of paper to linen back, $150 to $300, not going to bankrupt me. If it's something that needs a bleach bath and there's missing paper, so they have to find period appropriate paper that's the same color to like fill in that area. If they have to go over creases and tears with watercolor pencil to match the color so you don't see the tears as visibly. Anything like that will add to that cost. I've definitely seen a poster, maybe a little bit, maybe two pieces of paper that cost over $1,000 to fully linen back and restore, simply because of all the bits that have to be fixed in that. So depending on the state of deterioration.
And in this case, you decide if you go with the restoration or if you leave it as it is right now. I mean,
Yeah.
we have this nice, well, if I can say nice, it's this piece of Obregón. He's a Colombian painter, and El Bloque de Búsqueda, the police were looking for, I don't know, Pablo Escobar, one of these guys from the cartels, and there was a gunfight.
Yeah.
So one of these paintings has a bullet hole.
Oh, but that
adds to the story.
Yeah, but things like that, when the damage is just as valuable to telling the story as the like that's
Okay.
like, I would absolutely keep the damage because that's another layer of history. We've had actually we with this poster actually you should use.
So when we are putting together a show, come up with a concept. It's 3 years, maybe 4 years before the show actually turns up. You start writing. We go through a very rigorous editing process. It's 5 different layers of editing. You're still obviously trying to source the posters. So basically, let's say it takes 2.5 to 3 years before the posters get hung.
Yeah.
So you don't touch it in the last few months because you just don't want to, unless, of course, the chief curator and now director comes in and says, I saw this poster on the wall outside, so I took my knife out and I cut it down. The lesson you've got to take from this, children, is she carries a knife.
Poster purposes.
For poster purposes only. Okay, fine, she carries a knife.
But yeah, so
Should be nice.
this was like a few days before the show was gonna open. And I was coming home from dinner and I saw this poster, like, and luckily it wasn't wheat paste, it was taped to the side of like the Post No Bills, like a construction site. And we were looking for something that would have brought in something about the link with Wall Street, because that was obviously a big protest point. Also, it was by a Latin American artist, so that was something that was important to me too when I looked further into the who made it. And so we found him and we talked to him and made sure he was okay with us putting it in the
And it's a
show.
very contemporary poster, obviously, because it's literally up on walls right
Yes.
now. So it added something to the present day narrative. So we wanted it in, but it was like, okay. And then you go to Ola, the design team, and it's like, okay, we can get it framed, that's fine. Where's it going to go? And it's like, oh, Tim, can you write? Yeah, I can write some water. That's fine. You know, it's okay.
But with the preservation, there was no time for us to have that live in bags. So and obviously there's like clear like packaging tape on the edges. So we sent it to the linen backer and we're like, just find a way to get the tape off. So they
You've got 2 days.
You got 2 days. So they chemically lifted the tape off, which was great. It's fine. It looks presentable, but it is not perfect. It is not in the most preserved means possible. Also, it's printed on newsprint, so it's such a delicate type of paper that is such a pain in the ass to try to preserve it, that like putting it in a water bath would make it worse. So you do have to make that decision, like, is it worth it or not? But also to your point about like having like the bullet hole in the painting, you did a show 2 years ago on espionage posters, like spy posters during the war, and we did have one poster from San Francisco that at some point in that poster's lifetime, it had been defaced. It was a very racist poster, but it also like had graffiti on it that compounded those issues. And we had to negotiate, like, do we take off the graffiti or do we use it as a part of that poster's lifetime? Like how did the public interact with that poster?
Because it was a particularly racist
It was real
poster.
bad.
It was an anti-Japanese poster, so it had every Japanese
Slur.
trope, slur, stereotype included in it, and of course it was by the San Francisco Junior Chamber of Commerce. I'm like, what the hell are you doing this in the first place? And this was at a period when any Japanese Americans had already been interned anyway. So it was there were multiple layers of story to it. So we took out something, but kept most of it.
We kept we took out like the most offensive word on the poster, but we kept the remainder of the graffiti because it told the story of the poster's life cycle.
And the paranoia that people had at the time.
Yeah. And but also we had no way of knowing if that graffiti happened when the poster was put up or if it happened 5 years ago. There's no way to know. So that negotiation of what do you keep and what do you fix is always present.
And who cleans them up? Like, where is the linen?
Oh, so when I was brought on to work here, I used the linen backer I used in my old job because, again, relationships are kind of everything. So there's a place called Poster Conservation in Stamford, Connecticut. Hi, Lee Malazzo. They are like the gold standard in posters, as far as I'm concerned. They're probably the most economical. They aren't going to bankrupt you. They're very honest with what they can and can't do. They make great recommendations. And they do a great job in a good time frame. So some restorers will take like 6 months to work on something, and I just don't have that kind of time. Or they'll charge you 5 times the price because they're trying to treat it like fine art restoration, which this isn't. It doesn't need to be that. So
It shouldn't be.
it shouldn't be that. These are posters. They were. If you saw, I did a interview a few weeks ago, and somebody on the Art Pod, very nice podcast, and I explained that, like, I'm a curator of trash. Like, all of this was meant to be thrown out. This is garbage that has managed to survive. So treating it like the Mona Lisa that's just not what it is. If you go to a poster auction and you see a bunch of poster specialists, if I was touching a Picasso print, like the gloves and the Picasso, if I go to a poster auction, I'm going like this because it's the only way I can feel where the restoration is. So I was training Melanie, who works in our collections department, how to feel for like what's wrong with a poster, and you can't do it unless you have your hands all over it, which you would never do to a fine art.
If you visit the museum, don't touch the posters. They're behind plexiglass anyway, but don't. Angelina can
Unless
do it.
I'm there.
Yeah.
But does that answer your question?
Yes, I'm just curious, like maybe it was a man in a, with a bathtub, or
Oh
is
God,
it
no,
something?
there is a guy with a bathtub, and I would not use the guy with the bathtub. That I've seen those videos online. I'm like, no, that's not good. So don't use the guy with the bathtub.
Okay.
It's almost a laboratory.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
people always ask, like, why can't you do restoration here? I was like, I don't have that kind of space. I don't have that kind of ventilation.
And
Like
that's
the bath,
a lot of expertise.
ventilation.
It's-
yeah, like the bath alone that you would have to put the poster in is as big as this conference table. Like
Wow.
that's how big these baths are, and also the hanging. You have to have a massive drying facility with giant racks. Like it's a process. The Lee Malazzo's place in Stamford, Connecticut is it's like an airplane hangar. These are big production facilities. So doing in-house restoration, I know some people do it, but it's that you're kind of like jerry-rigging it at that point.
In this process of curation, how do you handle the contrast or the changes between digital and analog techniques?
As in,
One of the things that poster has that make them special is how they were made.
Yeah.
As we are both designers, I illustrate digitally.
Yeah.
And I see the digital there, and I see the illustrator.
Yeah.
So how do you manage that? Is that more valuable if the poster were made before?
If it was a stone litho as opposed to,
Exactly.
yeah,
they're more expensive to buy. They're more like a Toulouse-Lautrec is more expensive to buy than this poster. But I don't.
But the image, I mean, at the end of the image, no matter if it is digital, I know.
no, it doesn't. Go to
Yeah, Winston.
Winston, yeah.
So not this, although you do love
I
this.
do love this one.
But so Winston's saying he does. It's obviously digital. He is a well-known designer. He's worked for like Adidas and Supreme, like big companies. And then he does posters like this like as a passion project. And I met him when we first opened the museum because he had a poster that the MTA sent him a cease and desist for. Because it was people believed, like when his posters are on the street, people think they're real. Like the company that he's saying that they're from really sponsors. If you saw on the news maybe a month ago,
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, really.
Philadelphia Eagles
Yeah,
for
yeah.
Kamala, yeah.
So there was a bus shelter poster that it's very similar in style to this. His style is very, very obvious. And it was Kamala Harris in a Philadelphia Eagles football helmet in profile, and it was like official sponsor or official presidential candidate of the Philadelphia Eagles. And the news was like, how dare the Philadelphia Eagles come out with in support of a candidate? You can't do that as a sports team. And the Philadelphia Eagles were like, we didn't authorize this. This is fake. But obviously it's satire. He does like ExxonMobil didn't produce this poster.
Or
Sesame Street
Yeah.
didn't
Yeah,
produce
no,
this poster, but people believed when they see these on the street that they did. The only thing with digital that we don't do is I don't collect digital files. We only collect posters that are printed. I don't care if it's done digitally. I don't care if it's done via stone lithography or silkscreen, as long as it is a physical object.
Because we're a poster museum.
Yeah, then we will collect it. So I don't see the negative value in that. I think these are some of the most popular pieces.
Yes,
of the
people
show.
stop with these, and I say humor matters. These are dark humor, and obviously you've got Cuddly Rex Tillerson, former CEO of ExxonMobil, and then Secretary of State in previous administration, and he's looking, saying, we're all in this together as the earth burns. And the thing which I said in the 1970s, nobody knew about climate change. It came out 10 years ago, ExxonMobil or Mobil was modeling climate change in the 1960s. Harvard did a study in 2023 and said, this is the most accurate long run climate simulations that anybody has. So they knew. It's not that they pump oil and gas because we still only use it one way or another. That's their job. It's the fact they lied. And Winston calls them out for that. And the Sesame Street one, I loved when we were doing the tours because I could look at everybody and I could see them going, 1, 2. People, everybody knows the count. Everybody likes the count. Obviously, it's not a Sesame Street poster. And it's funny, but it makes the very clear point about the Paris Climate Accord. And it allowed me to have the bullet point that, the initial target was 1.5 degrees Celsius of climate change above pre-industrial times. And make the point that, look, 1.5 degrees Celsius is 1 meter of ocean rise, 3 feet of ocean rise. And 2 degrees of climate change is 10 meters of ocean rise, 30 feet. So it's a really big difference, what seems like small numbers. It's the difference between you having a nice view of the sea and the sea being somewhat over your house.
So at the end, one of the things that you have in mind is the impact of
Yes.
the poster.
Yes.
No matter if it's just a red dot or like a big illustration, is the impact that it has in the public.
Yeah.
And Winston's posters are a great example of that. These people are always like, who makes posters now? And Winston is one of my favorite people to point to. These people think like print is dead and this
Print is
isn't
dead.
happening.
Nobody looks at posters.
His
Every time he
posters
produces one,
makes the news.
makes the news.
Because they're so impactful, and also just because he's figured out the secret sauce to get people's attention. Like every one of his grabs somebody's attention because people assume that they're real by the sponsored authority. At the same time, one of our last pieces in the show.
Probably should be the last bit.
Yeah, so this poster was put up in France during the Paris Climate Accord.
2015 Paris Climate Accords, yeah.
And what happened is, and obviously it's a spoof. It's not it's making fun of the fact that
Dieselgate, Volkswagen faked their output of CO2 emissions, and they've been fined, I want to say about $32 billion so far. But this went up all over Paris at the time of the Paris Climate Accords. And VW adverts in Europe are very much of this style. Everybody would recognize it. It's just, and then it says, sneakily, we're sorry we got caught. Not we're sorry we did this, but we're sorry we got caught. So again, it's calling out.
and obviously it's not by anyone.
Yeah, we're trying to make you think that we care about
Yeah,
that.
exactly. Yeah, there's no pity shown here. It's
And it's obviously not printed by Volkswagen. They didn't authorize this. It was printed by like an activist company.
But
called
this thing
Brandalism.
can make the brand like sounds
Yeah.
yeah,
in a positive way at the end.
yeah.
Yeah, but this was up in bus shelters, and how we got it was I figured out, I knew who the designer was. I emailed them. They were based in London. Tim was in London, got COVID, got the poster from the designers to deliver them to his hotel room and then carry them back on a plane.
After
After
my
you got
COVID
it,
had
after
passed
you-
away, yes.
To get it to the museum because it was cheaper than finding a way to ship it. Because it's massive. It's as wide as the table.
But this was produced by some sort of organization against.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
to
yeah,
make fun of.
yeah.
To
So
make
it
fun of
was
VW.
climate catastrophe. It's on the
Brandalism.
Brandalism. Yeah, it was produced by a group called Brandalism. So yeah,
Where do these guys find the funds?
So the designer behind this particular poster is part of a larger professional ad agency. So it's a passion project on the side.
most, I think virtually all. I mean, there are quite a lot of famous name designers in this show, and they all donated their time and everything else for free because it's an issue.
But also just because we have to pay the security guard over time if we keep anyone here longer. This is the last poster to show our favorite. But we want to, does anyone have any questions about how it was made, what we have on coming next? Any questions we haven't answered so far about like what poster curation is or what we do here at Poster House? Now, anything you want. Or not. My mother's not even saying anything? Wow, Mom.
You guys are more than welcome to drop a question in the chat. We're here to answer.
This is general, but how did you decide posters as a medium to?
To do a museum on?
Oh, well, for you, just like sorry, this is probably personal, but like in your own career, when did you decide like, oh, posters are really?
For me, I owned a few posters, but one of the realizations I had when I was doing the museum studies course was how exclusive museums can be. Lots of people are daunted by museums, right? And they're daunted by art museums in particular, high art. But everybody gets posters. I've never met anybody who's daunted by a poster. it's democratic, it's instant impact. So I thought, okay, this is interesting. And literally, as I came to that conclusion, I got an email because I go to an awful lot of museums saying, "There's a poster museum opening," and I was like, handy, I shall go.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was.
And he fangirled hard enough that we hired him as a docent, and then he pitched me on the show a few years later, and that's how this happened. So now he's a regularly contributing guest curator with us.
It is important to say that I think that posters has a very strong political intention, no matter if it's like environmental or like whatever.
Well, that's the beauty of them. Like a lot of people think of them as like movie posters or vintage advertising posters, like for like Toulouse-Lautrec's Can Girls. Like yes, those are posters, but another massive strain of poster history is the political. So you get
Virtually everything I've done has been
Yeah,
but
propaganda.
he's our propaganda.
But the ending can affect the art itself. I
Yes.
mean, in Colombia now we have left, far left, and
Yeah.
far right,
Yeah.
or right.
Yeah.
And it's different from here.
Mhm.
But there is this company of posters that during the 50 years before, they were like just making posters for the unions.
Yeah.
In the banks and
Yeah.
go to strike and blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. Now, the new wings of the left are using that technique to go against the establishment.
Well,
And
that's-
people
Yeah.
reuse imagery, right? I mean, if you create an image that's powerful enough, you will see it turn up again in a different campaign of different use, the words. It's because certain things stick
Well,
with people.
Porky Pig was not exactly intended to be an activist symbol, but they
That's
appropriate
true.
Porky Pig because I mean, like this was the most popular image in our gift shop. Everyone wanted a Porky Pig postcard because it's hilarious, but it's also like really grim and gets the point across. Because a recognizable image, somebody else has already done the work for you.
Mhm.
If you can recognize it, that's like it has a whole life and whole association that's already embedded in your mind. If it's a new image, you have to teach people to recognize it. But if it's something they already know, if it's a beloved figure, if it's Mickey Mouse, it's more likely to stay in their mind. And I think that appropriation is something you see a lot in posters.
Yeah, we had a Japanese poster show 2 years ago, and the Mickey Mouse image or an iteration. It wasn't clear. It was clearly Mickey Mouse, but it wasn't Mickey Mouse, and it was used to show the impact of Hiroshima, the impact of U.S. policy on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and again, Disney put a cease and desist on it. We managed to have the poster in the show, but again, it doesn't. Those images can be very powerful very quickly.
And how I got into posters is an internship gone wrong. I wanted to run Sotheby's, and I ended up working at a poster auction house for a summer, and then they held the job for me while I went to grad school, and then I was stuck there for a decade, and then look what happens.
Do you consider that somewhere in the timeline in the future, posters are not going to be more in paper and it's going to be digital?
Yeah, of course. There's a slow like wind down of how many posters are printed per year because of digital screens. If you go in the New York subway system, it's mostly screens, not printed posters anymore. So that's a collecting issue. But I still think like if you have the poster, if Winston Sang, who is such a digital artist, is choosing to still print paper, for a digital screen, you have to submit something to like the MTA has to go past approval to be shown, or you have to like hack into the system. But if you have if you as an artist or a designer have printed something on paper and you're the only person it takes to put that on a wall, there's an immediacy to that. There's a subversiveness to that you can override a governing authority. So I think there will always be a need for print.
And you like paper, right?
You seem to like paper.
Oh yeah, we love paper.
Yeah, but I think there will always be a need to or a draw to that because it's the easiest way to get a message across that doesn't require like hacking into a system or going through an approval process. You just need yourself and like some tape. So I don't think print is quite dead yet.
Maybe it's one proof is the death of the failure of NFTs.
Oh gosh.
Okay, and on that note.
And on that note, I will let my mother go to bed. And everybody else at home. Well, my mom not even have been on there, and her just lying to me.
I've met her before. She's very lively. I'm also surprised.